Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm very excited to have just an all-star cast of folks that have incredible experience when it comes to AI, data science, product development, recruiting. Just the amount of information that this group has is absolutely incredible. And so today we are going to talk a lot about debunking some myths around AI, what's reality, what's not, and what can we expect to happen over the next few years. Frankly, the genesis for this panel was that I contribute to a lot of different articles. I won't name any names because I don't want to tarnish any relationships, but there's this one portal that I was doing a lot of contributing to. And as I was reading the questions it was asking me to contribute to as a thought leader around resume, job search strategy, and recruiting, a lot of the questions felt really flawed to me. And people asking questions like, hey, the applicant tracking systems, what can a candidate do to increase the chances with having the right keywords on their resume that their resume is going to get picked up, right? And innately, that feels a little flawed to me because it assumes that applicant tracking systems are super sophisticated and full of AI, which isn't maybe necessarily the case, but that's why you're here today. So I want to just take a second to introduce all of the folks that we have today. Every one of these folks are incredible professionals. And so in no particular order, I see Vidal first. So I'm going to start with Vidal. Vidal has an engineering background, incredible passion for developing products that serve the community. Right now, he's leading a Salesably AI, an AI-driven initiative that helps salespeople based in San Francisco. He also created an incredible interview igniter, which if you get a chance as a candidate, if you're currently in the job market, go check out Interview Igniter. It helps you prep for your interview. Tons of great information. Vidal's also worked at LinkedIn, Uber, Autodesk, Walmart Labs. He earned his engineering degree from Carnegie Mellon and the University of Southern California and an MBA from Santa Clara University. And actually, right now, he's at an AI conference, sort of sharpening the sword, learning even more about AI. So, Vidal, I just want to give you a chance to say hi. And if there's anything else you'd like us to know about you, feel free.
Sure. Well, thank you, Kimberly. Really glad to be here and, share what I can and learn from the other panelists. I have a lot of experience as a hiring manager, so I'm going to really represent more from the candidate point of view because I've coached a lot of candidates and I've also written several books on how people can do better at job interviews, which is a, super critical conversation. So, just glad to be here and thank you.
I love it. All right. Now I'm going to introduce Bailey. Bailey Showalter, is someone who's been an executive at Indeed, Credly, Pearson, and she's also been featured in Forbes and Fast Company, which is really exciting. So for people are obviously familiar with Indeed. Not everyone may be familiar with Credly and Pearson and understand how that intersects into job search strategy and how businesses are using that tool or those tools. So maybe Bailey, tell us a little bit more about you. And if there's anything specifically you want to tell us about Credly, Pearson, or some of the experiences you bring to the table.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. And I'm really excited to be here. I've spent my career really in future of work. So looking at different angles, but helping people mobilize through their career based off of skills. So at Credly, it's a platform really dedicated towards recognizing credentials as they're being earned and then reflecting the underlying skills below those. So I joined to help people take those verified skills and get a job based off of what the work that they're doing right now. And then Credly was acquired by Pearson to continue that mission and also started expanding that through workforce learning and then in partnership with some of Pearson's other divisions, focusing on like higher education and K-12 as well. So in all of those efforts, though, it's really been focused on helping democratize access to jobs. And I've been focused on that from a product perspective. So trying to improve what's really out there today. With all of its flaws, which we can talk about. And then also as a hiring manager, I've been in that seat many times, built a lot of teams and know what I'm looking for, and what my colleagues and peers have been looking for in that process.
I definitely want to pin on that democratize, because I think we could have a whole conversation about just that. I love that. Thank you so much. Next, I would love to introduce Pierre Delinois. Pierre and I have a long history together. We've worked together in the past, and he has worked across technology, education, insurance, healthcare, and over the course of his career, he's held roles anywhere from product management to innovation, UX research, design, performance coaching, people analytics, and recruiting. So he brings a lot of different dimensions of thought in this space. So Pierre, anything else you'd like to add about why you think this is interesting? And I know you also have recently gone out on your own and founded Discovery Lab. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about Discovery Lab as well.
Yeah, certainly. So first and foremost, really just appreciative of the opportunity to be here, Kimberly, and get to share space with just so many awesome people with interesting perspectives. My career has been a really random walk that has somehow turned into this intersection between people, performance, recruiting, talent, innovation, and really technology and products. And that really summarizes the core of my personal passions. I'm really excited about opportunities to activate human impact and business impact. Discovery Lab is very much the realization of that. And I focus on working with organizations of various industries and sizes that really want to do that, want to find ways to bring humanity and business impact together in the services, products, and offerings they put out there in the world. In terms of my background and perspectives on this, I've spent time both as a recruiter, of course, as a candidate, having conversations with folks, but also training a lot of both early in career, early college hires, as well as experienced industry hires, how to really show up and tell their story effectively when they're in the recruitment process. I've also had the opportunity to be both a hiring manager as well as a frequent panelist on interviews and conversations. So I think this is a really relevant time for us to talk about not just how can I position my resume and my stuff to be seen well by the entities that I want to have conversations with, but how can I, as a candidate, make the most of artificial intelligence, of Gen AI, to really prepare myself effectively to tell my story and show up. So,
I love that.
Long way of saying I'm excited to be here.
I love everything you're saying. I also want to introduce Jenny Zhao. She's the co-founder and chief product officer at Hoot Recruit, which I think is the most amazing name ever. It's a software startup that automates candidate sourcing and outreach for recruiters and hiring managers. And she's also an ambassador board member for the Nashville Technology Council, a co-organizer of the Nashville Product Meetup Group, and founder and chapter co-lead of the Nashville Women in Product Group, which is phenomenal. Jenny and I worked together at another company where she was really pivotal in providing a new product experience that delivered digital recruiting for hiring 1099 workers remotely across the US. So that was incredible work. So Jenny, welcome. And I'd love if you want to tell us a little bit more about Hoot Recruit and anything else you want to add.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Kim. Really honored to be here in such impressive company. I think you nailed it as far as Hoot Recruit. So it's a software tool. It's aimed towards recruiters and hiring teams, helping to make the candidate sourcing process a little bit easier. We think about it as democratizing headhunting a little bit so that anyone can go and really find those top tier candidates, regardless of whether or not they've gone through the process of applying for your job. I'm most excited to be here today to share my very interesting perspective. So I do have a perspective coming from someone who was once an agency recruiter, a hiring manager, and now a product leader in the candidate sourcing and recruiting tech space. So I've kind of seen it from a number of different angles. And as we all know, hiring is a critical and really expensive business activity, especially because of the time investment it takes to get it right and then the cost of getting it wrong. So I think in all of these roles, there's always been a common thread of how can we be most respectful of the time of the candidate and the hiring team. And I think there'll be a lot of great conversations, discussions to be had.
I love it. Thank you so much. I want to introduce Rob Murphy. Rob is just an incredible light. I love Rob's energy. Rob took a gamble in the middle of COVID and co-founded Affinity Recruiting, which I think is incredibly brave. And if you know anything about Rob, you know that he absolutely adores his family. And he feels like helping people is a form of his spiritual gift, which is something I feel like he and I both share in common. Affinity now has 17 members, and they have filled countless roles across 37 states. So, Rob, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Anything else you'd like to add, or any comments that you've got right now?
Thank you so much, Kimberly. As everybody else has said, it is an honor to be here with an amazing group of people. Really appreciate the opportunity. I would say that we are probably the least sexy company represented here in the group today. I wouldn't say that we're doing anything that is particularly high tech or exciting from that perspective. We really, we use Indeed, we use LinkedIn Recruiter, we use all the things that most recruiting companies use. And we help small businesses find employees. We aren't really, I wouldn't say advancing anything technologically, but certainly people do come to us all the time looking for their next job and looking for thoughts, around the topics that we're going to discuss today. And I have ended up putting some serious time into just trying to help with that, and written a few things about it. And I don't know necessarily how good they are, useful they are. They're just kind of some of my observations. So I look forward to, as others have said, learning from everyone in the group today, and being more capable to help when people do reach out. Not a potential client, but just a candidate who's looking for some help finding their next thing.
Thank you, Rob, and modest as always. I want to introduce Craig Panichella. Craig has so much recruiting experience. It's wild. He has worked across IT, finance, media, healthcare, pharma, publishing. He's been responsible for hiring AI-driven professionals at Meta. He's sourced for machine learning engineers. His experience is absolutely extensive, and the amount of companies that he has worked for in this space, in the recruiting space, is broad, and it's also incredibly niche and granular at the same time. So, Craig, thank you for joining us. Anything else you want to add, Craig?
Just that I wish you would give me introductions for every single time I ever come on video. It was so nice. So thank you so much. And I mirror what everyone else is saying. What an impressive group. Thank you for including me. At my last role at Meta, I essentially worked with level 7+ AI and machine learning engineers, executive leadership level, putting them to work at Meta, being a partner with groups such as IG and Oculus. And this past summer, I've just been doing some part-time work with smaller cybersecurity companies, Risk, things like that. And I am super excited to learn more about the other people on the panel today. Thank you so much for having me, Kim. Thank you.
I love it. One of the words that I heard a couple of different people say that I think is really a great launch pad for this conversation is democratizing, right? And I think a lot of people, this will be super intuitive to, but let's just say you've been hiding under a rock somewhere. Maybe you don't know a lot about this. I would love for a couple of you to just sort of say more about democratizing and why it hasn't always been fair, and hiring hasn't always been fair, and what are some of the ways in which maybe some folks have been disproportionately excluded from processes. So anyone want to sort of take a stab at that one?
I'll dive in just for fun.
Okay.
I think that, it's interesting that, there's a wide range of issues around that, right? And there are a lot of conversations which are good about subconscious biases and, even the bias that goes into AI from people who have written the software. But, real world for me on a daily, weekly basis is, we talk to a lot of companies who are trying to hire, and we often have to let go of clients just because, there are still people that just, they'll come out and say things that you can't believe that anybody would come out and say. They'll tell you exactly what they want an employee to look like, and just right down to just everything that you shouldn't say. And so, there are still people out there like that. And it's just part of the world. And so I think that, and part of like in our paperwork with clients is that obviously you have to be an equal opportunity employer if you want us to work with you. And so I think that, as these solutions and as the growth of AI, and as you're dealing with ACS systems, I do think it's important to remember also that not every company is a place you want to work. And especially as you're on the job hunt, and hey, there's companies that come to us and they want recruiting help. Well, a lot of the times companies that need recruiting help, it's because people don't want to work there because it's a crappy workplace. And so it is important to remember, I think sometimes on the job hunt, there can start to be this feeling of desperation or I'll take anything, or I just need someone anywhere to give me a chance. And, I think that a lot of folks on the job hunt would be well served to just slightly increase the respect they have for themselves and say, no, I really do want to just go work at a place that is a good place to work. That's going to respect me for who I am. And I think people feel like when they're on the job hunt that all the cards are in the deck of the employer, but that's not really true. If the employer didn't have a problem to solve, they wouldn't be offering money to pay somebody to solve it. And so just respecting yourself in the process and understanding what you bring to the table. Obviously, you got to have some humility. You got to understand that you're not perfect and you need to learn and grow continually throughout your career like we all do. But, starting your job search from a place of self-respect and, a quiet confidence about what you're capable of doing for anybody, and you're worth the money. And it's a good mindset to be in as you're going through a job search.
I think you just pulled out a couple of really incredible nuggets. The first one is, as a candidate, you are interviewing the company as much as they are interviewing you, and you really should give your due diligence to do the research to make sure you understand who you are potentially going to work for and what their culture is. Secondly, what I heard you say is, sometimes, especially if you've been laid off, that scarcity mindset sets in, and you're like, what if I don't find a job? What if the severance runs out? I'm the sole provider for my family. And I get chicken skin when I talk about it, because I still remember that feeling as someone who's been through that, thinking like, how am I gonna, right? Bailey, I know you sort of have a unique perspective here. So I'd love, and also I think, Rob, you were incredibly honest that there are some people that bias is truly unconscious, where it's like, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to have that process in my system. Sometimes it's pretty implicit. So thank you for your honesty there. Bailey, I'd love to hear from you. And then after Bailey, I'd love to get Vidal's take as well. So Bailey, what thoughts do you have on this?
When I'm thinking about democratizing access, I think it really is kind of forcing the system a little bit to change. There are people who have who do have antiquated ways of hiring or thinking about finding talent. I would say most are trying to be good actors. There are some who aren't, but sometimes they haven't evolved the way that they think about hiring today to keep up with the tools that are available to them and the way that they could be doing better. And the things that I tend to pick on a little bit are things like years of experience in a resume or in a job description as a hard requirement, where you're just weeding out people who may be a little shy in terms of number of years, but have definitely done the work or have the skills. Or when you look at higher education, when there are times when it is a requirement, but there are times where is it really? And giving people tools to be able to understand the skills that a job seeker has, where they can actually do a great job, but the way that we have historically screened for people would have weeded them out. And so I think there's a human element where, as hiring managers, it's our responsibility to do better and identify when we are bringing bias into the hiring process. And as product leaders, there is an opportunity to force the tools a little bit to push people into more options, to be able to uncover the great candidates. They may not have historically considered. So there's a technology component, and I really encourage hiring managers to start to play around with all of the amazing tools that are available to reduce bias in the hiring process. But it's not eliminated if you don't bring the human component too. So it's an opportunity to have a deeper conversation with yourself. And I think when we start to bring these together, that's when we can start to really democratize access to opportunities where people are really getting hired based off of their capabilities and their skills, rather than some of the more arbitrary ways that we have historically screened people out.
I love that. Thank you so much. Vidal, I know you had some thoughts on this, and then I want to hear from Jenny before we move on to the next question.
So I'll talk a little bit from the candidate perspective. I think that lots of times people who maybe English isn't their first language, or they come from different cultures, they even have trouble creating things like resumes and different artifacts and documents. Some people don't have the advantage of having someone to coach or advise them on how to prepare for an interview or how to best present themselves. And so I think that AI is going to allow people, for no money or very little money, to be better prepared and present a better side of themselves, where they might just be, like if you get a resume and it has like typos and stuff, or it's not very clear, it might just get thrown out. Now I think people will have better opportunity to present themselves better and not be ruled out for those things.
I think I love what you said. And it reminds me of something that's pretty common that I see a lot as a career coach. And that is, I can see from a mile away when someone generated their resume using AI and didn't touch it. So I am a giant fan of AI plus human, right? So AI, and I think a lot of people are just now really starting to understand what AI is and how it works. So AI isn't a job search strategy expert. AI isn't an expert resume writer. AI is sort of taking what you do and it's generating what it believes to be the best content, but it doesn't mean that it's actually the right formatting or that it's the right word choice, right? And so I definitely think it makes it way easier. It's way more cost effective. I also think it's really important that you have the human element and you do your research on, so like a lot of times I'll see resumes and they're written like this. Thomas Keller is a, right? Or I am a, and my personal preference on resume is that you talk about yourself sort of like driven business professional with extensive experience in, right? But AI, it's interesting how AI is making things easier, but it's like, you've got to know how to harness that power. Jenny, I know you had some thoughts, so we'll turn to you, and then I'll give Craig a second to chat, and then we'll move on to the next question after that. Jenny, go ahead.
Thanks, Kim. So I think when you talk about democratizing, there's two groups of people that come to mind. One is for hiring teams. So, there's some really, really talented recruiters out there that are very, very good at uncovering, those hidden gems and those talents. But most teams either have to rely on paying for a lot of expensive tools, which not every team can afford, or they have to, or if you're a startup or a company that can't afford a agency recruiter or a recruiter's fee, you have to find other ways, and you're limited by what's available to you. So I think one aspect is the democratization of how can you create the space where great talent can be uncovered, even in lieu of not having the money to afford certain tools or certain services. The second side of things is from the candidate side. And so for candidates, if you're only relying on applicants, you're really missing on literally everybody else who doesn't know that your job post exists. Even more so passive candidates who are employed and don't have a resume because they are not actively looking, but could be a really great fit for your role. And, I think furthermore, it's well known that often women are less likely to apply for jobs than men if they don't check every single thing off on the job description. They have this habit of self-selecting themselves out of roles. And from a personal story, when I reflect back on the opportunities that most changed my life and gave me the greatest opportunities for growth, and really where I shone every single one of those opportunities occurred because somebody else saw something in me that I hadn't seen for myself before. Someone kind of gave me that nudge in that direction and said, hey, I think you'd be great for this role. And I was like, oh, me, really? Versus if I had seen that job by myself, I would have never applied. And so when I talk to others, people have this similar story. And so I think today it's important that even in an employer's market, that we remember at the end of the day, it's still humans hiring humans, and therefore diversifying where you find candidates is super critical to make sure you're uncovering not just like the most available talent or the person who, uses AI to create the best resume that a word matches, but actually that, you're finding the best person for the job. And I think that goes on both sides of the coin for both candidates and recruiters or whoever is responsible for hiring.
Yeah, well, I think we implied this, but I think I want to make it a little more expressed. And that is, a lot of times it's much, much harder for women to get a job, or for people of color to get a job, or anybody else who has been historically excluded. And there's lots of just natural bias in the hiring process oftentimes. Bailey mentioned this and I kind of laughed. So as someone who has been in diversity, equity, and inclusion for a really long time, I always laugh when I read those job descriptions, because it's like, we would like you to have 15 to 20 years of experience. We'd like you to have a master's degree, or like we require you to have a master's degree. We might consider you if you have a bachelor's degree and you have at least 25 years of experience. We would like you to have, and you like literally the list goes on. And I'm like, it's so tone deaf, because the majority of people that are in diversity, equity, inclusion jobs didn't have access, somehow got into the work because they were passionate about the work, and then eventually moved on. Like someone like me, by the grace of God, I was able to become a director of diversity and inclusion. I'm here to tell you, I don't have a degree. I have an associate's degree. I never went on to get my bachelor's degree. I struggled in school. I have ADHD. I'm dyslexic. School was really, really hard for me. I grew up with a mom who worked 3 jobs. We were incredibly poor. I was terrible at learning. But it's sort of like Jenny said, like, but my potential, and by the grace of God, I've had some people in my career that saw the potential that I had. But if you only rely on these job descriptions, which are archaic and not catered towards women or people of color, most women or people of color are going to look at that job description and be like, no way, I'm not going to apply for that. There's no way someone's going to hire me to do that. And by the way, they've already got 7,000 people that have applied for the job. Why would I apply? Right? Craig, I've made you wait long enough. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this one, and then we'll move to the next question.
No problem. Just to make 2 comments. Earlier, you were talking about using AI and using something like ChatGPT, which I use all the time. The thing is it's very robotic. For anyone out there listening that's thinking to themselves, oh my gosh, this is going to write a resume for me, it's only as good as the user. And I think Kim mentioned this earlier. If you add your own creativity to AI, I'm using ChatGPT all the time. I use it. I copy it. I go through and I make it my own. That is the best way to get things done quicker, use AI properly, and making sure you're getting the most out of it, and still not losing that voice, your own personal voice that's going into that resume, and your own personal skills that are going into that resume, rather than a robotic type of resume that does not sound like you. And they're saying, an employer's looking at reading, saying, yeah, they definitely didn't write their own resume. So in the end, that's how I would use AI to its best. As far as a applicant, that is the best way I would use that. You can use that for a resume, for a cover letter. You can use that for any type of skills. Pop it in and use it.
It's great. It's great. I'd love to know, Craig, from you specifically, since you did work at Meta and you were hiring people that did AI, is there any way at Meta, because I'm sure people will be really excited to hear from a recruiter who worked at Meta, is there any AI that Meta is using to identify candidates, or any special tools that you had access to try to identify those ideal candidates? I'd love just to hear a little bit about how you sourced candidates at Meta.
Absolutely. There are tools. However, a lot of it is very human based. Okay. So at the level that I had, it was a lot of it. It depends on the level that you're at Meta, but at the level I was recruiting at, it was a lot of one-on-one, going out and trying to find those candidates. What we used, as far as LinkedIn Recruiter, LinkedIn insights, everything, easy hour, whatever they gave us, whatever tools they gave us, you try to use to the best of your ability. It still comes down to keywords on the resume. It still comes down to a recruiter knowing exactly what they're looking for. To add into the conversation, my goals were essentially you had to have a 21% higher, a diversity rate of 21% or higher at a leadership. We were looking, I believe the number was looking at all leaders. We were going to have 30% of leaders at Meta, be some sort of, a diverse candidate. And that is a diversity and inclusiveness was huge. And the way we battled that was by using AI. I mean, you can even use certain Google searches and image searches as a recruiter to try to find someone. And that's what we did do. And it's how I hit my numbers to get to that point. I hope that explains it in the best way I could.
No, you actually just brought up a really great point, because I want to point something out for somebody, for the folks out there that may not understand why this is so important. A lot of times in the diversity and inclusion field, I will get things like, I don't understand why we have to hire a diverse hire just to hire a diverse hire. That's not what Craig is talking about. Like, we're not just hiring diverse people out of the kindness of our heart because we have that's not what this is. What this is that Harvard did a article not too long ago that says if you only have one woman in your final pool of talent, they statistically have no chance of getting hired. If you have a person of color and there's only one, they statistically have no chance of getting hired. But if you put two women in your final panel, the chances of one of them getting hired goes up by like 78%. If you have two people of color in your final panel, the chances of one of them getting hired goes up by like 194%. And what's really interesting is if you put a woman and a person of color in the final panel, it doesn't make a difference. And so a lot of what Craig's talking about is we do have a tendency in corporate America to put these outrageous things in our job descriptions that deter people from applying, or we have processes when we're hiring that create a lot of bias. Like, so for example, when I won't say the company, but there's a company that I work with where I was working on removing bias from their hiring processes. And as I was doing my research and my investigation, like one of the really most popular questions I found is like, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream? What does your favorite flavor of ice cream have to do with your competency, your skill set, right? And then the other piece that I think is even more complex is that we know women and people of color disproportionately are not represented in the STEM field, which makes it even harder to find those folks. And so being really intentional in your hiring practices so that you can find those folks and figure out where they are is really meaningful. I'd love to hear, and whoever, again, you can answer this through the lens of my experience as a recruiter, based on the companies you've worked for, you as a hiring manager. But I think like we haven't really talked about generationally, that like how people might look for jobs differently generationally. And so I think like if you're, and this is a blanket statement, not true of everyone, but like from an odds perspective, what we have found is that people from like the baby boomer generation, you went to work for one company and you stayed there forever. Or somebody from Gen X, you might have 2-3 jobs in your career and that's it. And then now we're really finding that millennials, Gen Z, they're incredibly tied to their value system. They don't want to work for companies that don't align with their value system. And even if they like you, they usually only hang out for a couple of years, right? But the reason I bring that up is someone who's a baby boomer, and let's say they've just gotten laid off after working for the same company for 20 years. A lot of the folks that I interact with, they feel like, oh, so I should just go naturally start applying to jobs online. And then 2 weeks later, they start getting like 200 rejection letters and imposter syndrome sets in. They're like, I'm not even qualified to do the job I've been doing for the last 20 years, right? So I'd love for us to talk about like what's the really reals around sourcing candidates? Like, how are you really finding candidates? Because I think that most candidates don't understand this process. So anybody want to sort of take a stab at that first?
Well, I'll come off mute. I think it's a mix. So I would say as a candidate, it's really important to try to get yourself in all of the mix of things. So I would say, I think of it as your network. that's a really good way to get introductions or to find out about opportunities that you may not have known about. And a lot of times I think people who are younger in their career think they don't have a network. And I certainly did when I was young, and I was like, you keep saying reach out to mentor. What do you mean? But there are going to be folks that you've worked with or that you've experienced in school. There are going to be people around you who, if you just start asking the question, they might know someone who knows someone. And it's as long as you're doing the follow up and asking good questions, you can start working your way through. So I think it's being really intentional with your network and being really clear with what your ask is, what type of job you might be looking for, help them help you. And then I think there is going and looking for jobs proactively. But that's one where I would, if you can, follow up with an introduction or try to find someone there. So it's really, I think, leveraging as many different approaches to being identified as a candidate. Going through recruiters is another great way to get an introduction. But it's another way to stand out. So I think it's a multi-pronged approach, at least from my perspective at this point.
Other thoughts, or anybody want to share tools like as a recruiter that you would have been using? Oh, Pierre, I'd love to hear from you.
Sorry, my mute button got stuck there, and I'll go ahead and lower my hand. So yeah, I definitely want to share a little bit from the mindset side of things. So I think this can absolutely be a really challenging process for individuals to go through when they find themselves in a position of, oh no, I need to now find a search. And what I found in my career, both as a recruiter as well as hiring manager, and even myself going through these, seasons of looking for my next opportunity, is I personally found less of an association with generations and more of an association with, it's just a really hard, unfamiliar skill for a lot of people. It's kind of like buying a house. When do you practice buying a house? When you buy a house, and you don't do that very often in your career. So it's often hard to know what are the most efficient ways to find my next role. And something that was really helpful for me that helped shift my thinking, and something I encourage a lot of folks when I talk to who are going through this type of a journey, is think about it from the perspective of the recruiter. A lot of what I was engaged in, a lot of what recruiters are engaged in, is it's a level of uncertainty avoidance. It's a level of working numbers and working a funnel, which means what's the best way for me to stand out? Well, it's exactly what Bailey described. How do I tap into my natural relationships that I have directly with either a recruiter or a hiring manager and use that to help tell my story? That way I have a bit more of a human-based path into telling a little bit about me, but also evaluating whether or not this role is a fit for me. Because just as we described and discussed in this previous conversation, 9 times out of 10 for most companies, all the stuff that's on the job description, that's only 40 to 50% of the story. So I think in summary, the opportunity really I encourage folks to pursue is, yes, work the easy apply LinkedIn button. Yes, submit the resume on the ATS, but more than anything else, activate your actual person-based human network to have conversations. You'll stand out more, and honestly, you'll learn a lot more, and it'll be a lot more engaging for you as you navigate that process.
Thanks, Pierre. And you're right. Like, I did not mean to say that like one generation has it easier than the other. Like finding a job, it is like, and that's the thing. Like I've chatted with clients that are SVPs. I've chatted with clients that are COOs, that are marketing VP, like at the highest levels of the organization. And like that imposter syndrome is still real. The inability to understand the process is still real, regardless of how smart you are, no matter what level of the organization you are. Like this is a mystery to everyone, which is why I'm so excited we're having this conversation. Rob, you have some stuff you'd like to add?
Yeah, absolutely. Prior to starting this company, I've had 4 jobs in my career. Never once have I gotten a positive response to a job application. And just to echo what's already been said, every single opportunity I've ever had has come from networking. And typically, it's been a combination of 2 things. One is simply tapping into my own network, even at times when I felt like it wasn't big. When I was young, coming out of college, I came out of college and couldn't get a job. I mean, day one, couldn't get a job in the field that I had a degree in. And it was only networking eventually, after someone finally kind of coached me through what to do, that led to my first job and to then every subsequent job. And even when I started this company or was thinking about it, all of our first clients just came from me calling through my phone book and saying, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Do you know anyone I should talk to? And I would really, really encourage, similar to what everybody said, but particularly Pierre, yes, you should still be doing some applying. Absolutely. Especially if you're, not any especially, you should absolutely be applying. You have to have your resume tuned up, ready to go. Ideally you can talk to somebody like Kimberly who can help you do that. If you can't afford that, then, pursue other resources. There are some free things out there that can, do something for you to help. But at the end of the day, sorry, I got an incoming call. Okay. At the end of the day, your network not only is going to be your most likely source of help, but also you'll be shocked at how much you learn by simply having those conversations and just talking to people. And however bold you're willing to be, more so is just going to give you more opportunity. If you're willing to go to a local chamber of commerce lunch, that's probably the scariest thing in the whole world, right? But if you're willing to do that, you're going to really stand out because most people aren't willing to do that. If you're willing to just look for free local networking events that you can go to, but even as simply as calling people that and just saying, hey, just 5 minutes, hey, I'm looking for a job. Do you know anybody I should talk to? Can I send you my resume? Can you give me any suggestions of, where to go? I sat down on Friday and had lunch with a young man who I used to coach in basketball. And he just graduated college. And we were talking about, next steps in his job search. And I was like, I think also too, again, whether it's the laid off thing or it's starting a career, you're not sure what's next. There's a level of uncertainty, of course. There's some fear at times that sets in. I was like, dude, we're talking about your network and you don't think you have a big network. I know your mom. Your mom knows. Your mom's in a, I don't want to give away too much detail because I don't want this guy to know I'm talking about him. But your mom knows everybody in this town. Have you sat down with your mom and said, who all should I call? Who all can I call and say, hey, I am Camille's son. I'm looking for my first job. Can I ask you some questions? Can I buy you lunch? Can we have a 5-minute phone call and you just give me whatever thoughts you have? So I think when you start to network, you don't know how much is really going to be there. It's always more than you think it is. And also, you're going to learn so much from those conversations along the way. And bonus, it is way more fulfilling. It gives you way more positive feelings versus just sitting here and apply, reject. So you've got to apply and you've got to have your resume. You got to do that in a smart and targeted way, but you've got to be networking. So I talked for too long. I'm sorry.
No, I love it. And so we've got a couple more comments. I want to hear from Craig first, then I'm going to hear from Jenny, and then we'll go to Vidal. So Craig, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think he said a lot of what I was going to say. You need to network. You need to get a referral, right? Somebody has to be a reference for you if you're going to land the job that you want, really. I will say this, though. Do not be afraid to apply. I think a lot of times people are like, oh, well, if I don't know anyone, I'm not going to apply. Yes, you get rejected a lot. I've gotten most of my jobs through networking. The best jobs I've gotten were jobs that someone referred me. Just keep that in mind. The best jobs you'll get. Not saying every job you're going to need a referral for, but the best jobs you get, you will need a referral. Not only that, the one great thing applying will do for you, especially through Easy Apply on LinkedIn, which, I think we all know LinkedIn is probably the best place for you to go to try to look and find a job. So many employers use it. So many recruiters go to it first. If after their networks, and let's face it, a lot of our networks, we're using LinkedIn as a Rolodex a lot of times to look at our networks. We're using it to house it back into our systems and so forth. So for me, it's a matter of, going to my hot books and networks first, and then going to LinkedIn and trying to find someone from there. So
you know what, and you should like a lot of people like if I could evangelize something, you don't want to think about LinkedIn like you think about your TikTok, your Facebook, your Instagram. Like it behooves you to have as many people on your LinkedIn as humanly possible, right? So I use this example with my clients. I'm going to give out a little secret that I share with my clients. So LinkedIn is a great search curator. So like if you were to type in Dell Technologies, and you're going to get this massive curated search of everything you can find on Dell. And then you can say, do you want to see products at Dell, posts by Dell? Do you want to see people at Dell? You click on people, and now it tells you like there's 160,000 people that have ever worked at Dell. You click on first degree, and then it tells you, hey, you personally know 362 people that work at Dell, which is pretty incredible. The reason I know that many people is because I worked there for 13 years, right? I don't plan on going back into corporate America, but how easy would it be for me to get a job at Dell again, knowing 360 people that are still there, right? But what's more powerful than that is when you unclick the first degree and I click second degree, I have indirect access to 16,000 people. So there's 16,000 people that I don't know, but someone in my network knows them. So just like the example that Rob was giving, where you're talking about someone young who's new out of college, they feel like they only know fellow folks that are getting out of college, but hey, my mom knows 5 million people. Hey, I'm going to go check out my mom's connections, right? Jenny, I know you've been waiting for a minute. I'd love to hear what thoughts you have.
Wow, there's so much to unpack here. So a couple of things here. So first, to Craig's point, just, if there's a job you really like, you might as well apply for it, right? Don't self-select out. So I think this kind of, what I was talking about earlier from a hiring team's perspective of diversifying their efforts, I think same thing applies for an applicant. If you're only trying to go after jobs in one way, you're losing out on some opportunities. There's probably an element of where you weigh your time and effort spent. I would still gear heavily towards networking, like everyone says, versus spending bulk of your time applying. But diversify your efforts, and it's not either or. Do a combo, 1-2 punch of it. Like follow up in different ways. Be a little bit creative there. The other thing I wanted to touch on too was Bailey mentioned using your network and getting those intros, and I definitely think like the warm intros is ultimately what matters. So if you know someone, that's always going to be best and top. And I think about like anytime I've ever had a role, in some cases the job description is not even written yet, and I ask some friends of, hey, I'm hiring like a product manager, who do you know, right? And the job description is not even posted yet, it's not even written yet. So I think those are some things where if you have a warm intro, that's always going to be best. And if you don't know the hiring manager or know someone at the hiring company, as others have mentioned, like creep your way into that, find people who do know somebody that can kind of help you slide into their DMs, like, as the kids say. Do they still say that? I don't know. I say this, not only doing so, but being smart about how you ask for help. So one thing you talked about, Kim, was generationally the difference. And I get a ton of messages all the time from new grads asking for help getting product management roles. And the thing is, I think someone gave them that advice once, but they didn't give them advice on how to do it effectively. So I get a lot of these blanket messages, and I'm sure all of y'all do too, where it's just, hey, can you help me get a role? And it's just kind of like, I don't know you. I don't know how to help you. What kind of role are you looking for? Also, I'm not a recruiter anymore, but I'm happy is there someone you want me to introduce you to? Those type of things. So I think like for the younger generation coming out of school, it's not just networking, but it's how you're networking, which means how can you build a connection with a person and get to know them, and so they can get to know you, and then be explicit. I call it like just kind of serving yourself up on a silver platter. How can you be explicit in asking for help? What do you want from this person? Why is this the best person to help you? What are you looking for? Are you looking for introduction? Whatever it is, but do the work first, and then make it easy for the other person to help you and tee you up for it, right? I think generationally, that is one thing that's a little bit different. And then on the other end of the spectrum, where you have older candidates who've been in the workforce much longer, the biggest piece of advice is like, take some time before you just dive into, this flurry of applying and whatever else. Take some time to learn what's changed. Just take a moment and like unlearn what you've learned, what you knew to be true before. It's a little bit of a different landscape now, and just be willing to adapt and, know that people are jumping jobs more than they used to. And it's not like that big of a deal that you got laid off, because a lot of people are getting laid off. you know how to use your tools. Like even someone I knew recently came to this world of applying for jobs, and they spent so much time and effort doing it. And I kept telling them, like, stop spending so much time doing that. Go find the hiring manager and just start dropping messages. And the moment they switched that technique, like, what a game changer that was. So use those tools out there. Take that advice. Do listening tours just related to how to be more effective in your search, and just take that moment first before you just start cold applying.
And I think I'll add on this, and then I'm going to turn it over to Vidal, and then I'll go to Pierre. I think, like, we've talked about networking. We mentioned referral links or referrals, but I think one thing that needs to be underscored is the fact that a lot of organizations have formal referral programs where you either put the name of the person in the application, or they give you a link. That's critically important, because in a lot of different companies, it puts you in an entirely different pool. So, like, the 5,000 people that applied go over here, and then the 2 or 3 or 20 people that are referred go over here. And recruiters know, generally speaking, it's a higher caliber of candidate. In fact, I believe, and Craig, I'll get to you in a second too, I believe Craig actually got his job at Meta through a referral from someone, right? We'll come back to Vidal. So Pierre, if you want to come off mute and give your wisdom, that would be great.
Yeah, I just have so much energy around this topic. I had to go twice. This touches on something Jenny shared, and the key word that really jumped out to me that you said, Jenny, is networking. I think what we're really talking about here is how to think differently about networking and reframing the act of networking, which is, I'll admit, I was always somebody that networking felt a little slimy. It felt like I'm walking around a room and shaking hands and slinging business cards. And really what we're talking about is creating relationships and exploring possibility. It literally, and I think this is true of business, business is literally the act of people coming together to serve other people and create value with each other, for each other. And I think we forget that sometimes. The job search process is an opportunity for a person who's looking and having conversations to really express that and to be intentional in those conversations, just like Jenny shared about being specific about what they're after, but also making sure they're asking questions about how they can serve, how they can give, how they can create value. Literally, tactically asking things like, hey, tell me about your goals as an organization. What are you hoping to accomplish with this role? And really using that as an opportunity to craft a unique story around how they may be able to step in, create value, and speak to those challenges. That would just be one additional piece of advice I'd encourage any job seeker to take and think about this in a much more human, real way.
I love that. But Al, are you? Let's see if we can
I'm
hear
here.
you. Oh, great. Well,
Can you hear me now?
I do. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I totally agree with the whole importance of referrals. I mean, that is that's like a best in class advice, and it's highly recommended by everyone. But this was true even before like AI came out, and so and since we're talking about AI, what I wanted to mention is a couple things. I think is there's a whole class of tools that are available now, which I don't recommend, but they exist, which help you apply in mass to many jobs, right? They automate the spray and pray approach that lots of candidates use. And while you may say, well, I can tell that these resumes and cover letters are written by an AI, soon you won't be able to, because these tools are only going to get better. And I'm not really sure how recruiters are going to deal with that super amazing personalized content, which will get better. So with that said, I think that networking will become more important because all those other avenues will become super saturated. I mean, they're already saturated, because I agree, to get a job at a big tech company, it's very hard to get it if you apply. It depends on the kind of company. So anyway, I think networking will become more important. But it always was important.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Craig, you had a thought as well?
Yes, just going off of what you said, and first of all, Jenny was so right on what she said. I I get it all the time. Hey, can you help me? And I'm like, I don't even know you. So the best way, is to at least start with someone who knows you, who can vouch for you personally, right? Your work ethic, what you've done, whether it's in the community or even they may have not worked with you, but maybe they were a client. Maybe they were a vendor. Maybe they were someone that you worked with that's working with that particular with that particular organization that can help give you a good referral. That's one thing. The other thing is off of what you said. Yes, at large techs, especially Meta, there's great referral engines. And most people do get treated differently. You at least get a phone call and a contact putting your name into the referral engine. So a lot of times reaching out to someone that you even, I don't want to say semi-know at that organization that can put your name into that referral engine, it is going to come back on you where at least you'll get a phone call and get a chance, get in front of someone and turn that into the role. That's actually what happened with me at Meta back when it was Facebook. And I interviewed with them. My name was put into Facebook through someone I knew through my wife. And that helped me just get in front of someone to interview well and then get the role. Thank you.
I love that. So one of the things that Pierre said, it was like, it's sometimes like we think of recruiting and sometimes it feels slimy. And I think a lot of people, they hear the phrase networking, they have no idea what it means, right? And I think a couple different things. I think one, for any candidates out there, there's always an opportunity for this to be reciprocitous, right? So like, not only what can someone else do for you, but how can you help them, right? So one of my clients that I'm working with right now, he's literally like Tom Cruise from Top Gun. He is a ex-fighter pilot. He has extensive experience in the military. And so I was like, wait, I know this guy, Steve, who also is an ex-fighter pilot, who also is in operations. I need to connect them because they're going to have a lot of synergy. And if nothing else, they're probably going to want to hang out and talk story, right? That's a great connection. And so that's what you're looking for is who are the people in your network that are super influential, being super clear on what you're looking for, and then have an ask. This is what I need from you. I need a referral link. I'm looking for people in recruiting, specifically in technology, or I'm looking for people in human resources, specifically in product management, right? And then when you get on the phone with them, you're not going to be like, here's how you can help me. Like, hey, how are you today? Tell me about yourself. Let's learn a little bit about each other. And so we can figure out how we can help each other. And then here's what I'm looking for. Here's how you can help me. And by the way, is there anything else I can do for you? And if not now, if ever there's a time in the future that I can be of assistance to you, please let me know. This same client, I just told him, I was like, you're an ex-veteran. That's so valuable. As you're talking to these folks, ask them questions. What is your veteran recruiting strategy at your organization? Do you have a strategy? Do you have conversations about this? Do you have an employee resource group dedicated to veterans? If so, I'm totally open to chat with those folks just to see if there's any benefit I could add to the conversation, right? It's so funny. We started out this conversation all about AI and how AI is like changing the landscape, but we're also talking about how it still is networking, right? I'd love for folks to talk about like, how do we see AI changing the landscape? And in what ways is that a good thing? And in what way is that super challenging?
Well, I've got a lot of strong opinions about this, and I think a lot of the folks on this call who know me already know what they are. So I think for the foreseeable future, AI, in order for it to be effective, requires humans in the loop. I think there's a lot of opportunity for AI to, and it's already proven, AI does an exceptional job at doing transactional work, summarizing information, getting things maybe 80% of the way there or whatnot. But I think it's really incumbent on us, especially for a technology that's still developing and it's still ripe with bias. I mean, we know, as far as data goes, crap in, crap out. It's ripe for bias still. And I think knowing these things, the responsible thing to do is make sure there's still a human on the end of it. That is, you're not putting entire people's like lives 100% in the hands of AI, which is still a developing technology. So I think that's my general space in it, where AI does an exceptional job on handling volume, summarizing things, on, automating transactional work. We talked about the resumes, right? On the converses of that, using AI to help you draft like personalized messages. So you don't have to come up with it every single time. But then it's incumbent on the human just to make sure that the message makes sense. Are there some weird things that GPT decided to throw in there? Take those out, like take a couple moments, read it over, So to me, I think that's where AI really thrives in the talent tech space. And I think that's continuing where it'll play, just because there's too much that can go wrong, too much at risk of getting it completely wrong.
ChatGPT loves the word adept. I don't know why, but it does.
ChatGPT loves adverbs. If you haven't noticed, they just, he, she, it, they throw in a ton of adverbs unnecessarily in all of the prose that it writes.
I love it. Other thoughts on AI, good, bad, how it's changing the landscape for good or for bad?
Oh, I mean, it's interesting. I think we expect that it can do so much because it's talked about in the media all the time. And I think there are two lenses to think about AI. One is, as a job seeker, how can it help me? And I think it was Vidal who mentioned the tools where you can have AI apply to everything it thinks you're qualified for on your behalf. Those things are just adding to some of the problems that are making being a job seeker really hard right now. And it probably won't end up helping you cut through. But it can, as Jenny pointed out, be amazing to help you customize your messages. I think it's always easier to edit than to start from a blank screen. And so if you just say, like, here's my LinkedIn profile or my kind of background, write a first draft of a resume for me, then you have something to edit and start working from. And I think that can be a really big time saver. As a recruiter, there are a lot of AI tools that are available, and they are not ready for replacing a person in the process. Even from a screening perspective, there's a lot that goes into it. But when you think about what they can and should be doing, anything where they're making decisions about whether someone should be interviewed, you're getting into really weird territory from a bias perspective. We just don't have great ways to audit those models to see how they're making the decisions. They are teaching themselves and learning, and it can get into complicated territory very quickly. So as a tool to go out there and look for additional great candidates that you may not have found on your own, there are lots of amazing AI-based tools out there. Using it to completely replace that part of your workflow, we're not there yet.
Greg, thoughts?
Bailey said it best. It's not ready. So you see these, I don't want to name any companies, but they're saying like, hey, look, you don't need a recruiter. We can just go out there and, hire someone. We can help you get hired. I do not see how that works with higher level positions. I just don't see how if you're a higher level person, you can just stick in there and this machine is going to try to go help you find you a job. As far as efficiency goes, it's working extremely well as far as, once again, helping prepare a job description, helping prepare a resume or a cover letter. But you still have to put your own work in, as we mentioned earlier. And I honestly believe that, it may cut down on the amount of recruiters you need, but I still think that resume eventually still has to end up in the hands of a person, and that person still has to then give a person a call and evaluate and see how well they are at a job.
I think too, I'm a firm believer in shortcuts, and I'm not talking about lack of quality. What I'm saying is, I could, and I do mow my grass now as an example, but back when I lived on an acre and a half, I could have cut my grass. But why would I cut my grass when I can pay someone $50 to do it, right? And so I think, like Pierre said, like, this world is very confusing, very confusing. And if you're somebody who's like, I have no idea what the heck I'm doing, like I literally have no idea, it might be time to bring in a professional, right? Because part of what I think about is, like, there's a tool out there, and I'm not going to name the name because I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. There's a tool that you put that's out there that you copy and paste your resume, you copy and paste your job description, tells you what you're getting right, what you're doing wrong. there's a part of that I innately agree with. Like, should you try to get the right hard skills on your resume that match what you're looking for, what's on the job description? Sure, you should do that. But it also tells you like a score, and it tells you your soft skills that you're missing. And I'm here to tell you, like, when I see resumes that are full of adjectives and like loyal, hardworking, dedicated, I'm like, you can't prove that to me on a resume. Tell me that you hit 120% of your annual quota versus a 78% floor average, delivering $6.5 million to the organization. Now I know you can drive for results, and I'm going to be able to ask you about it, right? So I think like part of this is also understand the source, where things are coming from. And if you're not someone who's good at research or understanding how to weed and navigate that arena, you might be someone who could benefit from someone to help you, right? Jenny, you had some thoughts?
Yes. So kind of to what you said, like we talked a lot about like where AI is not good. But I think one place is that where AI can be really great is how it can be, like you said, how it can multiply you, right? So how can it help you to do more? So, for example, I'll give an example from my current company at Hoot Recruit. We had some really, really phenomenal top tier recruiters as our early beta testers. And, can they go and do a bunch of creative Boolean search strings and uncover really great candidates? Short answer is yes. I mean, they are like top tier recruiters. They're very good at that. But then you have to ask the question of like, what's the opportunity cost? How long is that taking you? And what could you be doing during that time instead? That's more higher value tasks. And on top of that, we even got feedback from those same recruiters that some of the things that our tool was able to pull out were candidates that they had not even covered before. We got feedback that I at this point, I thought that I had spoken to every single person in this market, and I guess not. And that's just because, like, as a human, your ability to do things is not the same as a computer's. And so how do you think about ways in which you can use AI to really serve you and multiply what you're capable of?
Pierre?
Yes, I want to follow that conversation too around what are the good elements or good offerings from AI. And certainly on the candidate side, I do think it offers a really interesting interview preparation co-pilot. We've talked a lot about resumes and its work you could do there, but I've come across some really interesting use cases of individuals doing role-played interactions where they might type into ChatGPT, hey, you are a head of sales and you're partnered with a head of product, and we're sitting in a two-person interview. What might be some questions that you can ask me for this particular role? And it gives you as a candidate an ability to just stretch your thinking a little bit. And yes, you're maybe not speaking the responses out loud, at least not for now. We'll wait till GPT 4.0 really builds out the voice agent capability. I'm sure that's coming around the corner. But at minimum, you can type responses and have a nice interactive experience that helps you start to expand your thinking and prepare a bit for interviews. So certainly want to emphasize that there are amazing tools available to candidates to really hone up and shore up their ability to tell a coherent story around the value they can create.
I love that. In fact, I'd love to hear from Vidal. Craig, I'll come back to you. I'd love to hear from Vidal because Vidal actually created a tool called Interview Igniter. And it's a tool that folks can have access to. And it helps, like, it actually does have like a speech to text capability where you can talk into it, do some mock interviewing. It gives you feedback on your tone. So Vidal, do you want to talk a little bit about Interview Igniter and how AI is helping create some more opportunity for candidate experience and candidates prepping for roles?
Yeah, no, thank you. No, absolutely. Yeah, it has speech to text capability. It can also measure the emotions of how you speak because it's not just what you say, but how you say it that's very important. So all these things are available. I think it's a great thing for candidates because, yes, you can hire, you can have a friend do a mock interview with you, perhaps, are they skilled at it? You can hire someone to do that. It costs money. Not everyone can even afford to do these things or has access to them. And so for very little money, yes, you can have an AI. Yeah, you can ask ChatGPT, certainly. It can give you some answers, but there are programs like mine which are crafted with much more specificity and detail to, help you practice for a job interview because it's a super critical conversation. I'm sure you've been in many debriefs, right? It's a 6-hour interview. And at one point, the candidate said one wrong thing and blew it, you know? So you have to be really, really well prepared. And so this is a great thing for candidates to take advantage of.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Greg, you had some thoughts?
Yeah, just this is for candidates out there listening. Make sure you try to use your proper titles, okay? Because the one thing that AI helps with is get recruiters to the candidates quicker, right? And a lot of ways they do that is, and we're only human, we're typing in what we believe that particular organization's title is going to be. So anytime you're writing a resume up or you're doing a profile on LinkedIn, use the proper title that that organization is using for yourself. If that doesn't make sense, let's say you are oh my gosh, I'm trying to use an example here. Senior program manager, correct? And maybe your actual title is client service manager. Use the actual title from your organization. That's going to get you more hits. Thanks.
No, I think that's absolutely great. One thing that we haven't talked a lot about, there's some tools that recruiters do tend to use a lot. LinkedIn Recruiter, Zoom, Indeed, there's some tools there. Again, I think there's some mysteries here on how it does and doesn't work, how effective it is at working, and then how much bias may or may not seep into it. So I'm curious. I'm not asking you, like, let's not throw any particular company under the bus, but I'm just curious about like what your thoughts are on how effective some of those tools are at actually helping you source candidates.
I mean, I think with anything, it just depends on the role in the industry, right? So LinkedIn is obviously kind of on everyone's tip of their tongue. Like it's probably the most commonly used one. But there are some industries where people are not on LinkedIn. Some include medical, like physicians. There's not all of the physicians are on LinkedIn. You know, that's not kind of a thing there. A lot of academia isn't on there. A lot of frontline type employees. Construction's not as frequently on LinkedIn. So those are just like a handful of examples, but there's very industry specific places that a recruiter might go. And this is why a lot of times you would have specialized recruiters. So I think LinkedIn, while probably the most common, most well-known, I think there's also bias in terms of who's in your own network and what type of role you do and what type of people are in your own network that also lead to like biases to, who gets uncovered in those type of spaces. I think another thing that we kind of, you hinted on earlier, Kim, was the generational differences. So a lot of times folks that are older who have been at one company forever, if at best they have a LinkedIn, there's probably not anything on it. But a lot of people don't have LinkedIn accounts who have been in one place forever because why, right? And on the converse of that, you have a younger generation that you have this whole place happening now where there's like, I think there's like recruiting happening off of TikTok these days now, right? Because it's a whole different generation of people coming into the workforce as well. And so I think there is your tried and true places, but really it comes down to what roles are you looking for and what industry are you in, and really leaning into what makes sense for the type of role that you're looking for.
Thank you. I'd love to hear, and anybody can jump in on this one. I think there is some misinformation about applicant tracking systems and how they function, how they don't function, what they're capable of. I think that there is some myths out there that if I just put the right keywords in my resume, if I just upload my resume in exactly the right way, whether it's Word or PDF and the right formatting, that somehow the applicant tracking system is going to go, like here's the magic wand. Boom, boom, boom. There's 5,000 people that applied for my rec. Here are the 3 people you should actually open their resume, right? So anyone who's actually worked in an applicant tracking system can sort of speak to this a little bit and help people understand how they actually work. I know everyone's smiling.
Well, it's funny. So I feel like it's funny being on the recruiter side, and it's also I have worked more with applicant tracking systems, like with them, not in them. And I will say they're very, there's a wide degree of sophistication of tools out there. And so it's almost hard to say with a blanket statement what are applicant tracking systems capable of. And so when we all want just like, what is the magic wand? How do I get to the top of the pile? But they're actually all written differently. And I mean, there is some nuance in it. And then there could be tools layered over top of those as well that you're not even interacting with directly, that are helping. But, I think you do want the relevant keywords in there. You mentioned earlier, Kim, you want the hard skills, not necessarily like, I'm really good at communication. So, you want to, but you do want to try to match against the job description as much as possible. And I think it's whether there's an applicant tracking system that's screening in the middle or a human recruiter looking at it, make it easy for them to see the obvious fit. And I think that would be my more overarching advice rather than trying to game the system, because the last I checked, there are like 30 leading applicant tracking systems and then a long tail of a couple hundred others that people could be using. There's not a system that you're going to win there. But if you implement some best practices, then you increase your shot or chances overall.
I love that. Craig?
I think some of the two biggest misconceptions are that recruiters, reach out to prospects all in bulk without reviewing resumes, and candidates can somehow trick or fool or beat an ATS into looking at them. I don't believe that's necessarily true. I think what you mentioned earlier, mentioning enough keywords that's going to kind of come up on any search is really good. As I was going on further, sometimes adding two different titles, maybe a slash, like I mentioned earlier, that could help you out. Like, okay, I'm a project manager / leader in this. That could potentially help you come back up on an ATS better. At some point, whether it's a recruiting coordinator, a recruiting manager, a senior recruiter, they're going to typically hit a wall. They're only going to look at 35 to maybe 60 resumes if they're finding what they want, if they're getting enough candidates. So typically, to me, I think you want to try to reach out to someone quickly when you see something get posted. If you are, apply right away to try to be one of those first people that somebody would be looking at, or be such a strong candidate. Make sure you go through the referral engines, like I said. Once again, I don't feel like there's a way to fool or beat an applicant tracking system. I think it's more so go through your referrals, initiate conversations with people that can get you into that position.
I do think you brought up a good point. I think there are some things you should not do, in my opinion, and I would love to see if there's any like how you feel about this. This one's a little controversial. Most people think you should upload your resume as a PDF, but I've heard that Word is actually a better choice and it causes less issues. So that's the first thing I'll say. Anyone agree or disagree?
I agree.
Okay. The second thing is, unless you are in a super niche like academia or science, I think a 2-page resume max. I mean, if you have like extensive, like maybe you can creep in like 2.5. But I mean, like I read a stat this week that you have 1.4 seconds to grab someone's attention on social before they scroll past you. And so like whatever you put on your resume, it's got to be super succinct, super polished, clean. Otherwise, you could be the most qualified candidate, but if you make your resume hard for me to read, I'm literally just going to throw it in a trash can. Does everyone think that too, or anyone feel differently? Yeah. Okay. The next thing I will say is, don't go to, I love Canva. Canva is my life, but do not go to Canva and get a resume template with icons and flowers and pictures. One, it's going to cause your resume to get kicked out of the applicant tracking system, or it's going to make it difficult to read. Or when you start to have things like your picture on your resume opens you to bias. Now, this is a double-edged sword. You got to have your picture on LinkedIn because the recruiter is less likely to stay on your page or pick your page if you don't have a picture. But on your resume, it absolutely opens you to even more bias. Anyone have thoughts on that or differing opinions?
Totally agree. I mean, don't leave the pretty thing. If you're a UX designer, don't use your resume to show it. You have probably a separate portfolio that you can link to and rely on something that serves that purpose. Your resume, like no one's going to give you, not at least not in this day and age, maybe once upon a time, but in this current day and age, it's more the content of the actual sustenance, the actual substance of the information versus the aesthetics of it.
Yeah, like I think that's where you use LinkedIn, like the featured section, the project section, add your GitHub profile, add examples of your work on LinkedIn. The other two things that I'll say on the resume, and then Craig, I'll turn it over to you, is your resume is one of the most important documents you own on your life, along with your LinkedIn profile. Edit, 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 edit. Like, make sure your punctuation is correct. Make sure you're spelling things correctly. Make sure that if you're no longer there, that the experience is in past tense. I literally pay attention to that as one of the key things along with your experience, because I want to see how much attention you actually have to detail. And if you can't pay attention to detail about yourself, why would I think you could possibly pay attention to the job or role that I'm looking at for you, right? The second thing is 95% of the resumes I read like a job description. While there's some amount of what you did that you want to include, like let's say you're a project manager, I intuitively understand what a project manager does. As you're describing that role, you want to make it clear to people, I was working locally, nationally, or internationally. I was managing one project or 17 projects. I was managing in software implementations, or I was a change manager dealing with multiple projects, right? But beyond that, like your bullets have got to pack a punch. You got to put as much contribution as you possibly can, because what you're hoping is that's what's going to stand out to the recruiter. So your bullet should be in sequential order. The most important thing should be first, and as much as you can quantify, do. And if you're not sure, because a lot of times people will tell me, I can't quantify this. Ask other people you've worked with. How would you quantify this? What else could I say and talk about that would help folks to understand the value that I brought to the table, right? Craig, thoughts?
Yes. So just going off of what you said and everyone else said, most application processes have a space for you to shine. You can put your own personal email, own personal website in there. You can put at your portfolio. They have all kind of spaces for that. Do not do it to your resume. Just plain words. And as you said earlier, Word is better than PDF. It goes into a system much better. Goes right into the system. Or use your LinkedIn profile. A lot of times, if your profile is really up to date and it is well written, that'll go into the system even better. So make sure when they say, "Hey, do you want us to self-populate this with your LinkedIn profile?" If it's up to date and it looks just like your resume, use that. It will populate better. And of course, you said it all. Have someone else look at your resume. Have a spouse. Have anyone else read your resume just to make sure you don't make any type of mistakes. I do this all the time because we're all prone to mistakes. I missed a period, or maybe that was past tense, or maybe that was something that I didn't really want to do there. And getting more people's opinion on your resume is also going to help you with the other point you made. Keep it fluid. Edit it. It's a fluid thing. Whatever job you're going to, you do need to change your resume for that particular role. There's a lot of companies out there that are really looking into different roles. Different experiences and requirements that they have. They're looking for people that could, get pulled from different roles. For example, if you are a person whose role was building relationships, setting up clients, you can use that skill set in so many different things. So making your resume, building it, editing it around that particular job is going to help you get that role.
I love that. I think you want to highlight the translatable skills for the role you want to go into, not necessarily where you've been in the past, right? So your experience is your experience. And maybe you were a nurse and now you want to go into pharmaceutical sales. Maybe you don't have pharmaceutical sales, but you certainly understand electronic medical records and maybe some of the different platforms that are out there. So how do you make that? How do you help folks to understand how easy it's going to be for you to transition into this new opportunity, right? I know we're at time. If anyone has to drop, feel free to do so. I want to hear from Jenny, and then I would love just some sort of closing remarks around either as a recruiter, as a hiring manager, or just you professionally and what has benefited you in your career. I'd love to hear sort of just some wisdom there as we adjourn. But Jenny, what was the thought that you had?
Back to kind of what you said about a misconception with applicant tracking systems. I think overall, there's just a misconception that it's about the software, and people forget that it's humans setting up the software and humans using the software. And I think that's really like segueing into the takeaways of remembering that in these conversations about technology and how you can leverage it and how you can be more efficient and yada, 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 at the end of the day, hiring is still a very human process. And it's humans looking at candidates, humans making decisions, humans applying and telling their stories. I think that's probably the one takeaway I'd have candidates think about is who's the human on the other side. You might be overwhelmed by all the applications, things like that, but also remember on the other side of it is also human that's probably also very overwhelmed in their work and having to sift through thousands of applications. So
I love that. And so I'm gonna start with the advice I would give to anybody that's a candidate. And then I'd love for you to chime in as well. And I have 3 pieces of advice. The first one is really check your limiting beliefs. A lot of the clients I work with will come to me and say, like, there's no way I can make 6 figures. I'm never going to get that job because I don't have a degree. I'm a coder, I'm a software engineer, but I never bothered to get my bachelor's. No one's going to hire me, right? Number 2, because all of those things are not true. 2/3 of the people in the United States don't have a degree, and people are employed that don't have degrees. So you can get the job. You just got to check that bias that you have in your own head about who you are and how you can show up professionally, right? 2, on your resume and on LinkedIn, and as you're interviewing, the phrase that I like to use with my clients is, what's the legacy you left behind, right? And for every role that you had, what is the legacy? What's the contribution? How did you leave that role better? Those are the things you should be talking about. And then the third thing is, if you really want a specific kind of job, show up and start working for it, right? Like when I worked at the last corporate environment that I worked in, I was in sales and operations. Off the side of my desk, I raised my hand and said, hey, I have some unique qualifications in diversity and inclusion and employee resource groups. Can I start the first ERG for the company and make it the model for others to follow? And I'll mentor 3 other leaders. Before it was all said and done, they started an office of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Guess who they hired to be their director of diversity, equity, and inclusion and employee resource groups? Me, because I did the job for free for a year and a half. Now, could someone else have come in and interviewed for that job and gotten the job? Of course they could have, but they knew I was in it to win it. I did it for free. So if you're already at a company and there's something you want to be doing, find people in the department that you want to be in, or reach out to your network. If you want to be in marketing, who do you know in marketing? Hey, can I take a free project? Will you mentor me? Will you show me some different, I'll work for free. I'll do like a free internship for you just for the experience, right? So those are the advice I would give. So I'd love anybody else have some advice you would give to candidates that are looking these days?
I do want to piggyback off of that because that's how I've gotten most of my step up kinds of jobs. Is I kind of joke and I pick on myself, but I'm like, I annoyed people into giving me this job because I just was doing it so much. But I think there is something for showing up for what you want and showing up as who you want to be at work. And I think that dovetails into my broader piece of advice, which would be very clear with what it is that you want and what you're looking for. If the easier that you make it to help someone help you, the more likely they will. So if you're really clear with or precise with your ask, that will go a long way. If you're really clear with showing on your resume how you fit this job, that goes a long way. If you're really clear when you're interviewing how your specific experiences make you the very best candidate based off of their company that you've researched, it goes a long way. So just be very clear with who you are, what you bring, and what you want.
I love that. Jenny, any last minute parting thoughts or advice that you would give?
I think I echo. I love the aspect of know what you want and articulate that. I think right now in this current job environment more than ever, it is a employer's market, and therefore they can be super selective. And when you kind of, again, put yourselves in the seat of a person evaluating hordes and hordes of resumes, how can you kind of be that like 80 or 90%? And only show the things that are most relevant to the job. You have the interviews, you have time to get to know people afterwards to share additional things, but to get that first part, when you think about your resume, that's a marketing piece of information. Think of it as the hook. That is not going to get you the job, but all you need to do is get the conversation. So I think like Bailey did a really great job articulating that, like make it really clear how you are the best fit for this role.
I love that. Pierre, any last minute thoughts from you?
I feel a bit like a broken record as well, but like all of this has been the story of my career journey as well. It's been relationships and connections and that organically opening up opportunities. So I would encourage any person to just truly prioritize human connection over everything. We forget about that sometimes. We want to find the latest hack or the latest trick or the structure or the format or the process. And there's something to that. It's not as if that doesn't matter, but I think the theme that I've heard us all express is that the human connection cuts past all of it. And that looks like clearly articulating where you want to head, types of experiences you're interested in, and telling the story of you LLC, you as a business, and the opportunity that you want to create and the value you want to create for the company you work with, for the team and the leader you work for.
I love that. Craig, last minute thoughts?
Last minute thoughts is everyone is so straight on with what they're saying here. They're on point, and I wish I would have. They stole some of the things I did, but I will end it with this: every role, every level of that role, and every organization is different. Don't be scared if you're a candidate. Do not be scared that you can't get into an organization that you really want. Go research that organization. Find out about exactly what they're doing, what's in the news, what are some big things that have happened with them. Take that information in. Then look at your resume and look at the job description and see what their requirements and how your skill set match up, and go in prepared. Prepare yourself for the questions that you believe are going to be asked. Because in the end, humans are the ones that are going to be doing the interviews. Humans are the ones that are going to be starting the source strings. They're the ones that are going to be doing the searches for you. And once you get your shot in front of someone, make the best of it. Put your best foot forward.
I love that. So first of all, I just want to thank all of you for being here. I encourage you, if you're watching and you've made it this far through this podcast and this video, I highly encourage you to follow Jenny, follow Bailey, follow Pierre, follow Craig, follow Vidal, follow Lindsay. I mean, these are some incredible thought leaders that have a lot to say and can give you just watch their journey, because their journey is an incredible one. And I can't wait to see where they are in the next 5, 10 years. And I think I'm just going to summarize it and say, you know what? I think it's human plus AI. AI will never replace human beings. AI is going to make all of our lives better, but it's going to be a learning period. It's going to take some time. There's going to be some benefits from it. There's going to be some negatives from it. But at the end of the day, you cannot replace human connection, and building those relationships is important. I'll also say, people are altruistic. Don't worry about if you haven't talked to someone in 5 years, 10 years. People want to help you. And I think people naturally just like to help each other. So don't be afraid to ask. Just make sure you hold folks accountable. Follow up a couple times. We're very busy. So thank you everyone so much for this conversation. This was an exceptional conversation. Thank you for your time. And I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you so much.